Jamal Bryant giving the eulogy for Freddie Gray, that message of hope coming just before Baltimore exploded in violence.
We are pushing black business and black respect. We have over $2 trillion worth of spending.
For years, Pastor Jamal Bryant built a reputation as one of the most influential voices in the black church. He led thousands, appeared on national platforms, and became a symbol of leadership for many believers. But behind the sermons, behind the packed church services, and behind the public image, controversy seemed to follow him everywhere he went. A high-profile divorce, allegations of repeated infidelity, questions about children outside his marriage, rumors involving congregants, public backlash from fellow pastors, and now a growing number of critics are asking the same question. Is this simply a pastor who made mistakes, or is there a pattern that people have been ignoring for years? Because once you see the timeline laid out from beginning to end, the story becomes much harder to dismiss. Long before controversy became attached to his name, Jamal Bryant was known for something else entirely: potential. From an early stage in his ministry career, Bryant stood out as a gifted communicator. His preaching style was energetic, confident, and direct. Crowds responded. Churches took notice. Before long, he was becoming one of the fastest rising pastors in the country. His biggest breakthrough came through Empowerment Temple in Baltimore. Under Bryant's leadership, the church grew rapidly. Thousands attended services. His messages spread beyond the church walls through television, conferences, and speaking engagements. What began as a local ministry was turning into a national platform. But Bryant wasn't known only for preaching. He also became active in social issues and community advocacy. He often spoke on matters affecting black communities and positioned himself as both a pastor and a public leader. Supporters admired his willingness to step into difficult conversations that many pastors avoided. As his influence expanded, so did his reputation. Many viewed him as part of a new generation of church leaders, pastors who could connect faith, culture, and current events in a way that felt relevant to modern audiences. Then came another major milestone. In 2018, Bryant became the senior pastor of Birth Missionary Baptist Church, one of the most well-known churches in America. Taking that position placed him on an even bigger stage and gave him influence over one of the most recognizable congregations in the country. From the outside, it appeared that his career was reaching new heights. But while his ministry was growing, questions about his personal life were quietly beginning to grow as well. And soon, those questions would become impossible to ignore. As Jamal Bryant's ministry continued to grow, his personal life appeared to be growing right alongside it. In 2002, he married Jamal Bryant. Together, they quickly became one of the most recognizable couples in church circles. He was a rising pastor with a growing national profile. She came from a respected church family and was often seen supporting his ministry. From the outside, everything seemed to fit the image of success: a growing church, a growing family, a growing influence. For many supporters, the Bryants represented what a modern ministry family could look like. They shared public appearances, raised children together, and projected the kind of stability many church members admired. As Bryant's reputation expanded, so did the attention surrounding his family. But public admiration can create a problem of its own. The more visible a leader becomes, the more people begin paying attention to what happens behind the scenes. At first, there were no major headlines, no public scandals, no explosive accusations. At least not publicly, but according to later interviews and reports, cracks had already begun forming beneath the surface, problems that most church members never saw were allegedly creating tension inside the marriage. The public image remained strong, the ministry continued growing, and few people had any reason to suspect that serious trouble was developing. Then something happened that changed everything. Private issues that had remained hidden for years suddenly became public conversation. And once they became public, they would spark one of the most talked about pastor controversies in America. What happened next didn't just affect a marriage, it raised questions that would follow Jamal Bryant for years. When news of Jamal and Giselle Bryant's divorce became public, it immediately drew attention far beyond their church. This wasn't just any marriage, it involved one of the most recognizable pastors in America, and the reasons behind the split would soon become a major topic of discussion. Over time, Giselle Bryant spoke publicly about what led to the end of the marriage. According to her accounts, repeated infidelity played a central role in the breakdown of their relationship. For many observers, that revelation came as a shock. The image that many people had admired for years suddenly looked very different. Supporters were forced to wrestle with difficult questions. How should church leaders be judged when they fail in their personal lives? Can someone maintain spiritual authority after losing credibility at home? And where should the line be drawn between private mistakes and public accountability? For critics, the controversy became more than a personal matter. They argued that the controversy raised concerns about leadership, character, and standards expected of pastors. Supporters saw things differently. They pointed out that religious leaders are human and capable of making serious mistakes. Many believed that personal failures should not automatically erase years of ministry work. The debate quickly grew larger than the marriage itself. What began as a private family crisis had become a public conversation about forgiveness, leadership, and trust. But as damaging as the divorce was to Bryant's image, another issue soon emerged that made the controversy even harder to move past. Because the questions were no longer only about infidelity. They were about whether there was a larger pattern hiding beneath the surface. And that's when an entirely new controversy began attracting attention. As the fallout from the divorce continued, another issue began attracting attention, and for many people, this controversy was even more difficult to ignore. Reports and public discussions surrounding Jamal Bryant included claims that he had fathered a child outside his marriage. Unlike many internet rumors that appear and disappear, this topic remained part of public conversations for years because it became connected to the larger story surrounding the divorce. For critics, the issue wasn't simply about a personal mistake, it was about consistency. They questioned how a pastor could publicly teach faith, family, and commitment while facing allegations that appeared to contradict those values. Supporters responded by making a different argument. They pointed out that spiritual leaders throughout history have experienced moral failures and personal struggles. To them, the real question wasn't whether Jamal Bryant had made mistakes, but whether a person should be defined forever by those mistakes. The debate continued. And as it continued, something else began to happen. The line between documented events and public speculation started becoming blurred. Online discussions grew larger. Social media amplified every new claim. Blogs and commentary channels began examining Jamal Bryant's personal life in greater detail. Some claims were based on publicly reported information. Others were never independently verified. That distinction would become increasingly important, because once public speculation enters a story, separating fact from rumor becomes much harder. Yet, despite the growing scrutiny, the conversations refused to disappear. Instead, they evolved. The controversy was no longer limited to his marriage or family life. Now, attention was shifting toward claims, rumors, and stories involving people connected to his ministry itself. And that's where the situation became even more complicated. As the years passed, Jamal Bryant found himself facing a challenge that many public figures eventually encounter: rumors. And once rumors begin circulating online, they often take on a life of their own. Various blogs, social media accounts, and commentary channels began discussing allegations involving women connected to ministry settings. Some claims suggested relationships with congregants. Others claimed that certain controversies had been hidden from public view for years. But there was one major problem. Much of the information was difficult to verify. Unlike the divorce, which involved public statements and documented reporting, many of these newer claims existed largely in the world of online speculation. Critics argued that the number of accusations alone was reason for concern. They believed that when similar claims continue appearing over a long period of time, people naturally begin asking questions. Supporters pushed back. They argued that public figures are often targeted by rumors and that accusations without evidence should not be treated as facts. Jamal Bryant himself denied some of the allegations that gained attention online. In particular, he publicly rejected claims that surfaced during one highly publicized controversy, calling the accusations false. Yet the denials did not stop the conversations. If anything, they created even more debate. Some people believed the rumors revealed a hidden pattern. Others believed they were seeing the dangers of internet speculation in real time. The result was a growing divide between two groups. One group saw warning signs. The other saw a pastor being judged by unproven claims. And just when it seemed those debates might finally begin fading away, an unexpected development reopened old wounds. Because years after their divorce, Jamal Bryant and Giselle Bryant would find themselves back in the headlines together once again. Years after their divorce, something happened that few people expected. Jamal Bryant and Giselle Bryant appeared to be giving their relationship another chance. For many observers, the news was surprising. The divorce had been highly publicized. The reasons behind it had been discussed openly. And yet, despite everything that had happened, the former couple seemed willing to try again. Almost immediately, public interest exploded. Supporters viewed the reconciliation as a story of forgiveness and second chances. They saw two people attempting to rebuild what had once been broken. Critics were far more skeptical. Some questioned whether old issues had truly been resolved. Others wondered if the relationship could survive the same pressures that had contributed to the divorce in the first place. As the relationship became a topic of public discussion, new scrutiny followed. Every appearance, every interview, every public comment. People were watching closely for signs of what might happen next. Then, another problem emerged. During this period, fresh allegations and rumors began circulating online. Once again, Bryant found himself responding to claims that threatened to pull attention away from the reconciliation itself. Instead of closing the chapter on past controversies, the reunion seems to reopen them. Questions that many believed had been settled suddenly returned to the spotlight. And before long, the breakup came to an end. The re-breakup reignited debates that had followed Bryant for years. For critics, it reinforced concerns they already had. For supporters, it was another example of a personal matter being turned into public entertainment. But while attention remained focused on Bryant's relationships, a completely different controversy was quietly approaching. And unlike the personal scandals, this one would spark criticism from inside the church world itself. For years, most of the controversies surrounding Jamal Bryant centered on his personal life. Then, the conversation changed. This time, critics weren't talking about marriage, relationships, or rumors. They were talking about something Bryant said from a ministry platform. In 2022, Bryant sparked national attention after suggesting that churches should explore new economic opportunities to better connect with younger generations. During those remarks, he discussed the possibility of using church-owned land for marijuana-related business initiatives. The reaction was immediate. Many church leaders were stunned. Some pastors publicly criticized the idea, arguing that churches should focus on spiritual missions rather than becoming involved in marijuana cultivation. Others questioned whether such a proposal aligned with the values many Christians expected from church leadership. The backlash spread quickly across social media, Christian media outlets, and church commentary channels. For critics, the issue was bigger than marijuana itself. They believed the comments reflected a broader shift happening within parts of modern church culture. To them, the proposal represented a growing focus on business, branding, and economic strategies. Supporters viewed the situation differently. They argued that Bryant was discussing economic empowerment and community development rather than encouraging drug use. Some believed his comments were being taken out of context. Once again, two very different narratives emerged. One side saw innovation, the other saw compromise. And just as debates over the marijuana proposal began dominating conversations, another issue was gaining momentum. Because some critics weren't focused on a single statement at all. They were beginning to ask whether a larger pattern existed, one involving ministry, influence, activism, and the growing role Bryant was playing far beyond the walls of the church. And that debate would become even more divisive. By this point, Jamal Bryant was no longer being discussed only as a pastor. He had become something more. A pastor, an activist, a public figure. And depending on who you asked, that was either one of his greatest strengths or one of his biggest problems. Throughout the years, Bryant became increasingly involved in public causes, social issues, and economic campaigns. Supporters praised him for stepping into conversations that affected everyday people. They argued that faith leaders should not remain silent when communities face major challenges. But critics saw things differently. They questioned whether Bryant was spending too much time in public battles and not enough time focusing on traditional pastoral responsibilities. Those concerns became even louder during high-profile campaigns and boycotts that attracted national attention. To supporters, these efforts showed leadership. To critics, they looked like politics. And the debate didn't stop there. Some church observers began placing Bryant into a broader category, often associated with celebrity pastors. They argued that modern church culture had become too focused on influence, public recognition, and personality-driven leadership. Others pushed back against that criticism. They pointed out that Bryant's influence continued growing despite years of controversy. Churches remained active, supporters remained loyal. His voice continued carrying weight in national conversations. That contradiction is what makes his story so difficult to define. Because if the controversies were truly destroying his credibility, why does his influence remain so strong? And if his influence remains strong, why do the controversies keep returning? Those questions lead to a much bigger issue, one that goes way beyond Jamal Bryant himself. Because the real debate may not be about one pastor. It may be about what people expect from spiritual leaders in the first place. And that question has no easy answer. At first glance, the story of Jamal Bryant looks like a story about controversy. A high-profile divorce, public discussions about infidelity, questions about children outside marriage, rumors involving congregants, backlash from fellow pastors, debates over activism, and criticism surrounding statements that divided the church world. But when you step back, a different picture begins to emerge. The real question isn't whether controversy has followed Jamal Bryant. It clearly has. The real question is why those controversies never seem to have the same effect they have on other public figures. Many leaders lose influence after repeated scandals. Bryant didn't. In some ways, his platform became even larger. His ministry continued. His church remained active. His supporters stayed loyal. And that has left both critics and supporters asking very different questions. Critics wonder whether modern church culture has become too willing to overlook serious concerns when a leader is successful. Supporters wonder whether people are too eager to define a pastor by his worst moments rather than his life's work. Some see a pattern of warning signs. Others see a man whose mistakes have been magnified under the spotlight. And that's where the debate remains today. Because after years of headlines, public criticism, rumors, defenses, and controversy, there is still no agreement on what Jamal Bryant's legacy will ultimately become. Will he be remembered as a pastor whose influence survived every challenge thrown his way? Or will future controversies force an entirely different conversation? Right now, nobody knows. But if history has shown anything, it's that when people think the story of Jamal Bryant is finally over, another chapter usually isn't far behind. And that may be the biggest unanswered question of all.